The sun burned like fire over the Colorado plains. Heat shimmered off the dry earth, and the air itself felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Down by the river, a young woman was tied to a rough wooden cross. Her skin was scraped raw against the splinters. Her clothes were torn and dirty, barely clinging to her trembling body. Sweat and dust streaked her face until she looked more ghost than human. Her cracked voice cried out through the still air. "Push, harder." At first, Elias McCrae thought he'd lost his mind. The old rancher had been riding slow along the river, his thoughts lost somewhere between memory and regret. But that voice, sharp and desperate, cut through the wind like a whip. He stopped his horse. The world went silent except for the hum of flies and the soft rush of the river. Then he saw her. Arms stretched wide, tied by rope to a wooden cross standing crooked in the sand. For a moment, he thought it was a scarecrow. But then her chest moved. She was alive. Elias jumped from his horse and ran down the slope. "Hold on, miss," he shouted, his voice shaking. Her eyes flicked open, full of panic, full of shame. She tried to speak, but no sound came. When he reached her, he saw something carved into the cross. One word, Rowan. His heart dropped. That name wasn't just hers. It was the same word carved on his wife's grave, the one the flood had washed away years ago. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then the woman gasped again, nodding toward the base of the cross. "Push, harder," she whispered. Elias looked and saw a wooden wedge jammed under the beam. He threw his shoulder against it. The wood cracked, the cross tilted, and she fell into his arms. She was half conscious, her breath ragged. He set her down gently, eyes turned away as she clutched her torn pants to her chest and dressed behind the fallen cross. The ground around them told a story: boot prints, a half-empty whiskey bottle, and rope fibers scattered in the sand. Elias knelt beside her. "Who did this to you, miss?" She tried to answer, but only tears came. Then finally, in a broken whisper, "Men from the ferry, they said I talked too proud. Said they'd teach me silence." Elias clenched his jaw. Anger rose in him like a storm, but he swallowed it down. He'd lived through enough blood to know rage never healed anything. He tore a strip from his bandana, dipped it in his canteen, and wrapped her wrists. The woman, Elma, looked toward the river. "My father's got a small shop near the ferry," she said weakly. "He thinks I'm in Yuma." "Then we'll get you home," Elias said quietly. For a while, they sat in silence. The cicadas sang, the river whispered, and for the first time in a long while, Elias felt the world breathe again. But then something caught his eye, a small brass button in the dirt, engraved with an F, prison issue, maybe. He pocketed it, frowning. "Did you hear anything before they left?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "A bell. I heard a bell before they ran." Elias froze. Out here, a bell could only mean one thing: someone else had seen everything. By the time the sun began to lean west, they were on the road toward the ferry. Elma rode his horse, Elias walked beside it, eyes scanning the trail. "You think they'll come back?" she asked softly. "They won't," Elias said, his tone steady. "Not while I'm around." At the bend in the river, they found it, a small brass bell hanging from a post, moving gently in the wind. Elma's breath caught. "That's the sound I heard." Elias untied it, turning it over in his hand. Inside, a drop of dried blood. "Someone grabbed this in a hurry," he muttered. "Maybe the person who saved you." They followed muddy tracks up toward the ferry house. The place was quiet, too quiet. Inside, a lantern still burned. On the floor lay a coat, dark and heavy, with brass buttons like the one in his pocket. Inside the coat was a note, the ink barely dry. "They know. Hide her. Trust no one." Elias's heart pounded. He looked at Elma. Then we're not done yet. The bell outside swung again, sharp and sudden. Someone was still out there. By the river dock, they built a small fire. The note lay between them like a secret neither wanted to touch. The river glimmered gold in the dying light. Someone knew I was here, Elma whispered. Someone still watching, too, Elias said, eyes scanning the hills. He cooked a bit of salted beef, handed her half. Tastes like dust, she said with a small smile. He chuckled. Better than dying hungry. For a brief moment, they almost laughed. Then, clang. A faint ring from upriver. Elias froze. Another bell. He motioned Elma to stay low and crept toward the sound. A small shape moved near the reeds. You can come out, he called. Ain't nobody aiming at you. A boy stepped out, barefoot, dripping wet, clutching a folded note. You the one ringing that bell, son? Elias asked. The boy nodded. Yes, sir. The man with the scar said if I waited, you'd come. Elias took the note. Same handwriting. Just one line this time, tonight at the prison wall. He looked toward the horizon where Yuma Prison's shadow stretched across the desert. That's where we're headed, he said. By nightfall, they reached the outskirts of Yuma. Crickets filled the air. The moon hung low, casting long shadows. Elias and Elma moved carefully toward the old wall. A figure stepped from the dark, a tall man with a scar across his left eyebrow. I meant no harm, he said softly. I just needed her safe. You left the notes, Elma said. He nodded. I saw what happened at the ferry. I pulled the bell to scare them off. If they find out I spoke, they'll kill me before dawn. Then why tell me? Elias asked. The man looked down, hands trembling. Because you're the only one who'll listen. He handed Elias a small leather pouch. Inside was a wedding ring, old, worn, and marked with familiar initials. Elias's heart stopped. It was his wife's ring. The one he thought the river had stolen years ago. Where did you get this? He whispered. The man swallowed hard. After the flood, I worked the graves. I found it in a nameless coffin. I kept it, hoping I'd find who it belonged to. Elias stared at the ring for a long time. The weight of it felt like fate. Finally, he placed it in Elma's hand. She deserves peace now, he said quietly. Maybe we both do. The scarred man turned and disappeared into the night. Elias and Elma stood by the river as the moon climbed higher. The water shimmered like it was washing away every pain they'd carried. Elias spoke softly. Life throws us against the wall sometimes. Maybe not to break us, but to remind us what matters. Elma looked at him, eyes steady. And what matters to you? He smiled faintly. Doing what's right, even when no one's watching. The first light of dawn brushed the horizon. The prison wall turned gold in the sunrise. Elma stood beside him, stronger now. The river breeze carried the faint sound of the bell, soft, like a promise. Elias turned the ring in his rough fingers, then slid it onto her hand. Maybe, he said, some things come back not to haunt us, but to start again. Elma's eyes glistened. Thank you, Elias. He looked away, cheeks warm. Just don't go getting tied to any more crosses, miss. They both smiled as the sun rose over the river, washing the world in gold. And for the first time in years, the old rancher felt the weight of the past lift, carried away by the water, like a promise kept at last.